You're watching The Legal Breakdown. All right, Glenn, all eyes are on Judge Cannon down in Florida right now as she determines whether or not she's going to dismiss the case altogether against Donald Trump. So today is the hearing that we were waiting for, where she determines whether or not she's going to do exactly that, determines whether or not she's going to throw out this case. So can you give an update on how that hearing went?
Brian, I wish I could say after an all-day hearing, she ruled from the bench. She denied Trump's motion to throw out his case, and she set a trial date. But she did none of those things.
Shocker.
What she did after an all-day hearing at which she invited outside parties, conservative operatives, among others, to just come on in and offer their opinions and their arguments, what she did was promptly set more briefs to be filed in the case. No end in sight. And then next week, Brian, on Monday and Tuesday, she will turn her attention to hearing more frivolous motions that have been filed by Donald Trump. Again, with no end in sight, with no trial date. But it's becoming increasingly clear that the resolution of the motions, how she rules, if she deigns to rule one day, doesn't really matter. The delay is the point. And she's giving Donald Trump all the delay he wants. So the reporting is that in that Florida courtroom, the hearing went kind of as expected. Donald Trump said, this special counsel thing, it really is unlawful and unconstitutional. You ought to just kick Jack Smith off the case and just toss my case entirely. Even Judge Cannon seemed skeptical of that, particularly because we've been using some version of independent counsel or special counsel dating back to the 1880s in America, and it has always been deemed lawful and constitutional. So it doesn't seem like she was all that impressed with the arguments from Donald Trump's attorneys or these outside conservative operatives. But again, I don't think it's the resolution of the motion that matters as much as the delay litigating these motions involve. I assume at some point, maybe in the coming days or the coming weeks, she will deny Donald Trump's motion to toss the whole special counsel thing. But again, that will give Donald Trump more time, and hopefully he's going to be able to delay it until after the November election. That's always been Donald Trump's goal.
Now, Glenn, talk about how this is actually a rare instance in which we hope that Donald Trump does succeed in his motion to dismiss the case because of this, bogus idea that you can't have special counsels prosecute.
I feel a little dirty even making this argument, Brian, because I'm a rule of law guy, and there is no legal authority for what Trump is urging Judge Cannon to do, just toss out the whole special counsel thing. I think in recent years, 8 different jurisdictions have confronted this very issue, and they have all said, of course, the special counsel procedure is lawful and constitutional. But, there comes a point in time where I almost hope that Judge Cannon will just grant one of these motions to dismiss, because that will have a couple of benefits. One, Jack Smith will instantly appeal it to the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals, and they will very quickly reverse Judge Cannon. And then, even more importantly, I think it will inspire and perhaps give Jack Smith everything he believes he needs to file the long overdue motion to recuse, motion to remove Judge Cannon from the case. And on the eve of that hearing on Friday, Brian, we got some blockbuster news from the New York Times that 2 of Judge Cannon's fellow federal court judges in Florida, in her very jurisdiction, had urged her not to preside over Donald Trump's federal case in Florida. And one of the 2 judges, reportedly, is the chief judge of that federal jurisdiction, Judge Cecilia Altanaga. Boy, if that doesn't tell you everything about whether Judge Cannon's impartiality might reasonably be questioned, it has been questioned by her own fellow federal court judges.
So what's clear here is that Trump will use any idea that he can cook up out of his imagination, out of whole cloth, and use that as a predicate to try to get this case thrown away. Like here, I don't know how much more fantastical you can get than we can't be prosecuted because Jack Smith is a special counsel, despite the fact that special counsels have been used for over 100 years in this country. But he'll use any excuse as a justification to seek a delay. And very clearly, Judge Cannon is willing to bite on any of these excuses that Donald Trump puts forward. Will there come a point where, if we're months down the line, years down the line, where Judge Cannon continues to offer to grant Donald Trump every single delay on every single ridiculous dilatory motion that he's putting forward, where it becomes the straw that broke the camel's back? Like when does this process stop, where Judge Cannon keeps allowing these frivolous motions to move forward, where it becomes so clear that the whole point is just to not let this thing go to trial?
It's a great point, and that is completely within the hands and the discretion of Jack Smith. When is enough enough?
Yeah.
Let me give you a flavor of the motions that she'll be taking up next week, because they're equally frivolous. One is Donald Trump is attacking Chief Judge Beryl Howell. That was the chief judge in Washington, D.C., who oversaw the grand jury investigation of Donald Trump. Chief Judge Beryl Howell decided that one of Donald Trump's lawyers, Evan Corcoran, was being used by Trump in furtherance of Trump's criminal attempt to obstruct justice by refusing to give back the classified documents after they had been subpoenaed by the grand jury. And Judge Beryl Howell ruled that because the crime fraud exception applied because Trump was using his attorney in furtherance of a crime, well, then Trump can't avail himself of the attorney-client privilege, and she ordered that the privilege yield and that Evan Corcoran must go into the grand jury and testify about the crimes of Donald Trump. Donald Trump has now filed a motion in Florida saying, you know what, I don't like that result way back when, so I'm going to file a motion anew. That has already been adjudicated, litigated, resolved. Res judicata is the Latin term. The thing has been litigated and resolved. But Judge Cannon, rather than just saying, denied, is going to hold another, presumably, all-day hearing. That's just one of the motions. You want to hear about another one? Donald Trump is seeking to suppress the evidence that involves the boxes of classified documents that were recovered from Mar-a-Lago pursuant to a search warrant that was issued by a federal judge, because that federal judge found there was probable cause that Donald Trump had evidence of crime at his Florida home, Mar-a-Lago, and sure enough he did, and the FBI agents seized the boxes of documents. Donald Trump is trying to suppress, in other words, toss out all of the incriminating evidence. Why? Because it's something called spoliation of evidence, a fancy word. They're claiming that, wait a minute, I might have had 100 documents in one of these boxes. But what you can't tell me precisely is, did I have one classified document next to a magazine article, next to another classified document, next to a news clipping about how good I look? Or did I have two classified documents and then a news clipping and then a magazine article? Oh my goodness, you've destroyed the evidence because you don't have the exact sequence, which, let me tell you, you know how many execution of search warrants I've been involved in when we grab, we seize big boxes of stuff, then we have to go through it and catalog it. It really doesn't matter the order in which these documents were in the box. What matters is what was in the damn box,
right,
all of which has been preserved and documented and provided to the defense. This is how asinine, that's a legal term, how asinine these motions are that are being brought by Donald Trump, that any experienced judge would say, denied, let's set a trial date. She is endlessly litigating this stuff with no end in sight and still no trial date.
Glenn, is there a way, or I guess I should ask, what is the way to remove a judge whose corruption is so overt that they don't, that they kind of relinquish their ability to remain on the bench?
Impeachment. Impeachment is the way you dislodge a federal judge for misconduct, for crimes.
Is it impeachment and then a conviction in the Senate, just the same way that a president?
Yeah. Exactly. Impeachment in the House of Representatives and then a Senate trial on the articles of impeachment, just the way, just the way they tried to remove Donald Trump. But Mitch McConnell unfortunately gave Donald Trump, who's now an aspiring day one dictator, a safety net and refused to even allow for a legitimate Senate trial. Talk about a process being rigged. Mitch McConnell rigged the Senate trial.
Glenn, the last question, and we've spoken about this before, but I think it's worth continuing to beat this drum, is the reason that Jack Smith hasn't taken action, hasn't sought a motion to recuse against Judge Cannon, because all of the actions she's taken don't amount to a 10. They don't cross the line, but it's a lot of like 9s that go right up against the line, but she doesn't pass it. And so to us, it feels like, because we see 9 after 9 after 9 after 9 out of 10, and all of it together feels like a lot, but nothing is like the smoking gun that really gets us over the line that would make it so obvious that he would seek her removal.
Yeah, sometimes you have to add those 9s together and in aggregate decide whether her impartiality might reasonably be questioned, which is the federal standard. But I can only assume that Jack Smith believes he's not quite there yet. But Brian, the federal law doesn't say that a judge must do one thing, which, viewed in isolation, allows for her impartiality to be reasonably to be questioned. It really is a pattern that has emerged time and time again. Judge Cannon has shown herself to be biased in favor of Donald Trump and, frankly, pretty darn antagonistic toward the federal prosecutors.
Okay, so real quick, let's end with this. What are the next steps in this process, in this mini process here, as we await Judge Cannon's decision on whether or not to dismiss this case?
Couple of more days of motions hearings next week on those largely frivolous motions we were just discussing, and there is no deadline for Judge Cannon to even resolve those motions, decide those issues. So will she do so in the coming weeks, or will she just stack up more frivolous motions as they come in? Because as long as she's willing to entertain them and decline to set a trial date, Brian, you can bet Donald Trump's lawyers will continue to file frivolous motion after frivolous motion. And the ultimate question is, for Jack Smith, when is enough enough?
Yeah, we're going to get to the point at some point where the spelling, a typo in somebody's name is going to be enough justification for a little side hearing with no end in sight. With that said, we will, of course, stay on this issue as we await some resolution here and some forward movement in this interminable trial happening down in Florida, as well as the other prosecutions that Trump is contending with. So for those watching, if you want to stay up to date on legal news, please make sure to subscribe. The links to both of our channels are right here on this screen. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
And I'm Glenn Kirshner.
You're watching The Legal Breakdown.